On Thanksgiving morning, I arrived at my son's house with the homemade pecan pie, the same recipe my mother taught me 50 years ago. Through the window, I saw my grandson sitting alone on the back porch in 28-degree weather, no jacket, no gloves, while inside, my daughter-in-law's family was carving the turkey, laughing, clinking wine glasses like they owned the world. My grandson, 8 years old, was shivering so hard I could see it from the driveway. When I opened that back door and wrapped my coat around him, when I asked him why he was outside, he looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Grandma, they told me I eat too much. They said there wasn't enough room at the table for someone who isn't really family." That sentence didn't just break my heart. It shattered 40 years of silence I had kept for the sake of peace. Let me tell you what led to this moment. My name is Sophia Mercer. I am 67 years old. I spent 35 years as a pediatric nurse at St. Joseph's Hospital in Portland, Oregon, watching children come and go, some healed, some not, but always protected, always cared for. I thought I understood pain. I thought I had seen the worst of what families could do to each other. I was wrong. The worst was waiting for me in my own bloodline, hidden behind smiles and holiday dinners and carefully constructed lies. My son Theodore, everyone calls him Teddy, married Clarissa Wentworth 11 years ago. I remember the wedding like it was yesterday, the white roses, the string quartet, the way Clarissa's mother Judith looked at me from across the aisle like I was something she had stepped in. I should have paid attention to that look. I should have understood what it meant. But I was too busy being happy for my son, too busy believing that love conquers all, too busy being a fool. Before I continue, if you've ever discovered a truth too late, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because here every story is a mirror of life, and sometimes we need to see our reflection to understand we're not alone. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the world before everything fell apart. Teddy was my only child. His father Raymond passed when Teddy was just 14, a heart attack on a Tuesday afternoon. No warning, no goodbye, just a phone call from the hospital where I worked. The cruel irony of being told your husband was dead in the same hallway where you saved other people's families every day. After Raymond died, it was just Teddy and me against the world. I worked double shifts to pay for his college. I drove him to every baseball game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. I was there when he got his first job, his first apartment, his first heartbreak. I was his mother, his father, his best friend, his everything, and he was mine. When Teddy brought Clarissa home for the first time, I wanted to love her. I tried to love her. She was beautiful with her honey blonde hair and her perfect teeth and her way of laughing at exactly the right moments. She came from money, old Portland money, the kind of family that had buildings named after them at the university. Her father, Franklin Wentworth, was a retired federal judge. Her mother, Judith, was a professional philanthropist, which, as far as I could tell, meant she attended charity galas and judged other people's jewelry. They lived in a house in the West Hills that looked like something from a magazine, all marble floors and fresh flowers, and staff who called them sir and ma'am. I lived in a 2-bedroom bungalow in Southeast Portland, the same house Raymond and I bought when Teddy was born, the same house where I had planted tomatoes every summer and hung Christmas lights every December and cried alone in the bathroom after Raymond's funeral because I didn't want my son to see me break. The Wentworths never said anything directly about the difference between us. They didn't have to. It was in the way Judith would touch her pearls whenever I spoke, the way Franklin would check his watch when I told stories about the hospital, the way Clarissa would gently correct my pronunciation of words I had been saying my whole life. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself they were just different, not better, just different. I told myself that love was enough, that Teddy's happiness was all that mattered, that I could swallow my pride for the sake of peace. For 11 years, I swallowed. I swallowed when they scheduled the wedding on a date they knew I couldn't get off work, then acted surprised when I had to beg my supervisor for an exception. I swallowed when they forgot to include my name in the program, listing the bride's parents in elaborate calligraphy, while the groom's family was represented by a blank space. I swallowed when they announced the pregnancy at a dinner I wasn't invited to, when they chose godparents from Clarissa's side without asking me, when they moved to a bigger house in the same neighborhood as the Wentworths and never once asked if I wanted to be closer to my grandson. His name is Oliver. Oliver Raymond Mercer. Teddy insisted on the middle name, the only fight he ever won against the Wentworth machine. Oliver was born on a rainy March morning, and when I held him for the first time, I made a promise. I would love this child with everything I had. I would protect him from everything I could. I would be the grandmother he deserved, even if his other grandparents had more money, more influence, more of everything except heart. For 8 years, I tried to keep that promise. I showed up for every birthday party, every school play, every little league game. I brought homemade cookies and handmade cards, and toys I had saved for months to afford. I was there when Oliver lost his first tooth, when he learned to ride a bike, when he started asking questions about his grandpa Raymond, and whether people really lived in the clouds after they died. I loved that boy more than I knew it was possible to love anyone, and I thought he knew it. I thought he felt it, but there were cracks forming that I chose not to see. Little moments that should have warned me something was wrong. The way Oliver started calling Judith and Franklin Grandma and Grandpa with a capital G, while I became just Nana Viv, a smaller title, a lesser role. The way he would look at Clarissa before answering my questions, as if checking whether his responses were approved. The way his hugs became shorter, his visits became fewer, his eyes became harder to read. I told myself he was just growing up. I told myself all children pull away eventually. I told myself the Wentworths weren't poisoning him against me, even though some part of me knew, even though some part of me had always known. The first real warning came on Oliver's 7th birthday. I had spent weeks planning his gift, a telescope just like the one Raymond used to point at the stars when Teddy was young, telling him stories about constellations and astronauts and all the mysteries waiting to be discovered. I wrapped it in paper covered with rockets and moons, and I drove across town in the November rain to deliver it myself. When I arrived at the party, the Wentworth house was already full of children in matching outfits and parents drinking champagne and a bounce house that probably cost more than my monthly pension. I found Oliver in the corner, surrounded by a mountain of presents and expensive wrapping paper. He was opening a box from Franklin and Judith, an iPad with a custom case engraved with his initials. The look on his face was pure joy, the kind of joy I used to see when I gave him a homemade teddy bear or a jar of my special lemonade. When it was my turn, I handed him the telescope with trembling hands. He unwrapped it slowly, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. A flicker of the boy who used to sit on my lap and ask me about the moon. But then, Clarissa appeared behind him, her hand on his shoulder, her voice sweet as poison. "Oh, how nice! A telescope. Maybe we can put it in the garage with the other old things." Oliver looked up at her, then back at me, and his face closed like a door slamming shut. "Thanks, Nana Viv," he said, already reaching for the next present. "It's cool, I guess." That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store and cried until my chest hurt. I told myself it was just one moment. I told myself children are ungrateful sometimes, that it doesn't mean anything, that he would grow up and understand. I told myself a lot of things that year. Most of them were lies. The second warning came 6 months later, at Easter dinner. I had been invited, technically, though the invitation came through Teddy in a text message that felt more like a summons than a welcome. I brought my famous deviled eggs, the ones Raymond used to say were better than anything in any restaurant, the ones Teddy had requested for every holiday since he was old enough to chew. When I arrived, the Wentworth house was already full of guests I didn't recognize, all of them dressed in pastels and pearls, all of them speaking in that careful way that rich people speak when they want you to know they're rich without actually saying it. I found the dining room table, looking for a place to set my eggs. Every inch was covered with catered dishes, silver chafing dishes and crystal bowls, and arrangements that looked more like art than food. I stood there, holding my humble plate, feeling like a child who had wandered into the wrong classroom. Judith appeared beside me, her smile as sharp as a knife. "Oh, Sophia," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I didn't know you were bringing something. We already have eggs, you see." The caterer made quail eggs with caviar, very French. She gestured to a tiny plate of tiny eggs that probably cost more than my grocery bill for the month. "But I'm sure we can find somewhere to put yours. Maybe in the kitchen, with the staff." I have asked myself 1,000 times why I didn't say something in that moment. Why I didn't tell her that my eggs were made with love, not money. Why I didn't remind her that her grandson had Raymond's blood in his veins, that I had earned my place at that table, that I deserved better than to be dismissed like hired help. But I didn't. I just nodded and carried my eggs to the kitchen and spent the rest of the dinner pretending I wasn't invisible. That was the moment I should have known. That was the moment I should have fought. Instead, I told myself it was just Judith being Judith. I told myself that families are complicated, that peace is worth more than pride, that silence is sometimes the kindest gift we can give. I swallowed my pain like I had swallowed so much pain before, and I went home to my empty house, and I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up, wondering if I had made the right choice. The third warning came in the fall, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Teddy called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice strange and distant, like he was reading from a script someone else had written. "Mom," he said, using the word that used to mean everything and now felt like a formality. "About Thanksgiving. We've decided to do things a little differently this year. Clarissa's parents are hosting and they want to keep it intimate, family only." I laughed because surely he was joking. Surely he wasn't telling me, his mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, that I wasn't family. But the silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. "Teddy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I am family. I'm your mother." "I know," he said, and I could hear the guilt in his voice, the cowardice wrapped in politeness that the Wentworths had taught him so well. "But Clarissa thinks, we think, it might be better if you came for Christmas instead. You know how stressed the holidays are. We just need some space." Space. That word hit me like a slap. Space from what? From the woman who had given him life? From the grandmother who loved Oliver more than her own heartbeat? From the only link he had to his father, to his history, to everything that came before the Wentworths and their marble floors and their careful cruelty? I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to remind him of every sacrifice I had made, every double shift I had worked, every dream I had deferred so that he could have a better life. I wanted to ask him when he had become this person, this stranger who let his wife's family erase his own mother like she was a mistake to be corrected. But I didn't. I just said okay. I said I understood. I said I would see them at Christmas. And then I hung up the phone and sat in the dark for 3 hours, trying to remember how to breathe. And you, watching this right now, what would you do if your own child asked you to disappear? Would you fight? Would you scream? Or would you swallow your pain like I did, hoping that silence would protect the love you were so afraid of losing? That question kept me awake for weeks. I replayed every conversation, every moment, every choice I had made that led to this exile. I wondered if I had done something wrong, said something offensive, committed some invisible crime that warranted being cast out of my own family. I tortured myself with hypotheticals, with what-ifs, with the endless second-guessing that comes when someone you love decides you're not worth their time. But something changed the week before Thanksgiving. It started with a phone call from Margaret Chen, a woman I had worked with at the hospital for 20 years. Margaret had retired the same year I did, and we had stayed in touch, meeting for coffee every few months to complain about our joints and reminisce about the old days. She called me on a Monday afternoon, her voice hushed and urgent. "Sophia," she said, "I need to tell you something, but you can't say where you heard it. My niece works as a housekeeper for a family in the West Hills, the Wentworths." I sat up straight, my heart suddenly pounding. "What about them?" Margaret hesitated. "She overheard something at dinner last week. Clarissa and her mother were talking about Thanksgiving, about you. They were laughing, Sophia, laughing about how they finally got rid of you, how Teddy was too weak to stand up to them, how Oliver was learning to, I don't know how to say this, to see you the way they see you, as an embarrassment." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp, an embarrassment. That's what I was to them, not a mother, not a grandmother, not a woman with 67 years of life and love and loss. Just an embarrassment to be managed, to be minimized, to be erased. Margaret kept talking, but I barely heard her. She mentioned something about Clarissa's plans for Christmas, about how they were going to limit my time with Oliver to a few supervised hours, about how Judith had suggested that maybe, eventually, it would be better if I stopped coming at all. She said she was sorry. She said she thought I should know. She said she was there if I needed anything. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat very still for a very long time, watching the shadows move across my living room wall as the sun set and the darkness crept in. Something was shifting inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something older, something deeper. It was the same feeling I had when Raymond died, when I realized that no one was coming to save me, that I would have to save myself. It was clarity, cold, hard, devastating clarity. For 40 years, I had been swallowing insults and injuries, swallowing my pride and my pain, swallowing everything that hurt because I thought that's what good mothers did. I thought that sacrifice was love. I thought that silence was strength. I thought that if I just kept giving, kept bending, kept breaking myself into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually someone would notice. Someone would thank me. Someone would love me back. But no one was coming. No one had ever been coming. The Wentworths didn't see my sacrifice as love. They saw it as weakness. They saw my silence as permission. They saw my bending as proof that I could be broken completely. And Teddy, my son, my only child, the person I had given everything for, had let them do it. He had stood by and watched while they erased me from his life, from his son's life, from the family I had built with my own two hands. That night, I made a decision. I would not disappear quietly. I would not accept my exile with grace and dignity. I would not let them win. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew that something had to change. Thanksgiving was coming, and this year I would be there, invited or not, expected or not, welcome or not. The days that followed were a blur of preparation and planning. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't ask for permission or advice. I simply decided that I would show up at the Wentworth house on Thanksgiving morning with my pecan pie. The same recipe my mother taught me, the same recipe I had made for Raymond and Teddy every year of their lives. I would walk through that door with my head held high, and I would see for myself what had become of my family. On the night before Thanksgiving, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the windows, thinking about everything I had lost and everything I still had to lose. I thought about Raymond, about how he would have handled this, about whether he would be proud of me or ashamed. I thought about Teddy as a little boy, running into my arms after school, telling me I was the best mom in the whole world. I thought about Oliver, about his laugh, about the way he used to look at me like I was magic. At 3 in the morning, I got up and started baking. The kitchen filled with the smell of pecans and brown sugar and butter, the smell of home, the smell of love made tangible. I cried while I mixed the filling. I cried while I rolled out the crust. I cried while the pie baked, its golden surface rising and falling like a sleeping chest. But by the time the sun came up, I was done crying. I was ready. The drive to the West Hills took 45 minutes in holiday traffic. The morning was cold and gray, the kind of Oregon November that seeps into your bones and makes you forget that the sun exists. I parked down the street from the Wentworth house, my hands steady on the wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see the house from where I sat, its windows glowing with warm light, its driveway full of expensive cars. The Wentworths were already celebrating, already carving the turkey, already raising their glasses to another year of privilege and power, and the certainty that they deserved it all. I picked up my pie and stepped out of the car. The cold hit me immediately, cutting through my coat like it was made of paper. I walked toward the house, my footsteps crunching on the frost-covered grass, my breath making little clouds in the air. As I got closer, I could hear music coming from inside, some kind of classical piece that probably had a name I couldn't pronounce. I could see shapes moving behind the curtains, silhouettes of people laughing and dancing and living the kind of life I had never been invited to share. But then I saw something else, something that stopped me in my tracks and turned my blood to ice. In the backyard, visible through the gap between the house and the garage, a small figure was sitting on the back porch. It was Oliver, my grandson, my heart. He was wearing jeans and a thin sweater, no jacket, no hat, no gloves. His shoulders were hunched against the cold, and even from a distance I could see him shivering. I dropped the pie. I didn't even hear it hit the ground. I ran around the side of the house, my old knees screaming in protest, my lungs burning with cold air. I pushed through the gate into the backyard, past the covered pool and the dormant garden and the expensive patio furniture draped in canvas covers. Oliver looked up when he heard me coming. His face was red from the cold, his lips slightly blue, his eyes wide with something that looked like shame. "Grandma," he said, using the word I hadn't heard from him in over a year. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. I just pulled off my coat and wrapped it around his thin shoulders, rubbing his arms to get the blood flowing, checking his fingers for frostbite, doing all the things I had done 1,000 times as a nurse for other people's children. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, my voice shaking with a fury I was barely containing. "It's freezing. You'll catch pneumonia. Where's your jacket? Where's your mother?" Oliver's eyes dropped to the ground. He didn't say anything for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was so small I had to lean in to hear it. "They told me to wait outside," he said. "They said there wasn't enough room at the table for someone who isn't really family." The world went silent. Everything, the music from inside, the wind in the trees, the distant sound of traffic, all of it disappeared. There was only Oliver's voice, echoing in my head, repeating those words over and over. Someone who isn't really family, who isn't really family, isn't really family. I knelt down so I was eye level with him, ignoring the cold seeping through my pants, ignoring the pain in my knees. "Oliver," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "look at me." He did. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from the cold, from the effort of not crying, from the weight of everything he had been carrying. "You are my grandson," I said. "You have my blood in your veins. You have your great-grandfather Raymond's name. You are more family to me than anyone in that house will ever be. Do you understand?" He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "They told me," he started, then stopped. "They told me you weren't coming for Thanksgiving. They told me you didn't want to see me anymore." His voice cracked. "They told me you were embarrassed to have a grandson who wasn't smart enough, who ate too much, who asked too many questions." The lie was so monstrous, so perfectly crafted, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. They had taken my absence, my forced exile, and turned it into proof that I didn't love him. They had used my silence as a weapon against my own grandson. They had made him believe that he wasn't worthy of love, that he was a burden, that the one person who would have done anything for him had simply walked away. I stood up. My coat was still around Oliver's shoulders, and I was shivering now, but I barely felt it. Something inside me had gone very quiet, very still, very cold. Not the cold of fear or despair, the cold of purpose. The cold of a woman who had finally seen the truth and was ready to act on it. "Take my hand," I said to Oliver. "We're going inside." He looked at me with something like hope and something like terror. "But they said—" "I know what they said," I interrupted. "Now I'm saying something different. You belong at that table. You belong with your family. And I'm your family. So take my hand." He did. His fingers were cold in mine, but his grip was strong. Together we walked around the house to the front door. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I simply opened the door and walked in, my grandson beside me, my head held high, my heart burning with a fire that 40 years of swallowing had failed to extinguish. The Wentworth living room was exactly as I remembered it. All cream-colored carpets and fresh-cut flowers and tasteful artwork that probably cost more than my house. The dining room was visible through an archway, the table laden with food, the guests, about 15 of them, frozen mid-conversation, mid-bite, mid-laugh. Judith was at the head of the table, her silver hair perfectly styled, her face a mask of shock that quickly morphed into outrage. Franklin was beside her, his judge's face settling into the cold disapproval I had seen 100 times before. Clarissa was standing near the sideboard, a carving knife in her hand, her mouth open, her eyes darting between me and Oliver and the door, as if calculating how this scene would play. And Teddy, my son. He was sitting at the table with an empty plate in front of him, his face pale, his eyes wide, looking at me like I was a ghost he had hoped would stay buried. "Sophia," Judith said, her voice dripping with the kind of politeness that's actually an insult. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you." "I know," I said. "I wasn't invited." I looked around the room, making eye contact with each of the guests, these strangers who had witnessed my grandson's humiliation and done nothing. But I came anyway, because my grandson was outside, in 28-degree weather, without a jacket, while you were in here, warm and full and celebrating. Judith's face tightened. "Oliver needed some fresh air," she said. "Children get overheated at these gatherings. I'm sure you understand." "I don't, actually." I kept my voice calm, steady, the voice I used to use with panicking parents in the emergency room. "I don't understand how anyone could look at an 8-year-old boy and decide he doesn't deserve to be at the table. I don't understand how anyone could tell a child he isn't really family when his grandmother, his father's mother, has loved him since before he was born." The room was silent. Oliver pressed closer to me, and I put my hand on his shoulder, letting him know I wasn't going anywhere. Clarissa stepped forward, her smile tight, her eyes dangerous. "Sophia, this is really not appropriate. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," I said. "We've done things privately for 11 years. We've had polite conversations and careful silences and all the appropriate behaviors that families are supposed to have. And where has it gotten us? My grandson thought I abandoned him. He thought I was ashamed of him, because that's what you told him. Clarissa's smile faltered. I never, she started, but I cut her off. You never what? Never told him I didn't want to come for Thanksgiving? Never made him feel like he was less than his cousins on your side? Never sat at this table and laughed about finally getting rid of me? She went pale. Her eyes darted to the side, where Margaret's niece, the housekeeper, was standing by the kitchen door, her face carefully neutral. The room seemed to hold its breath. That's right, I said. I know. I know what you've been saying about me. I know what you've been planning. I know that you've spent 11 years trying to erase me from my son's life, from my grandson's life, from any place where I might matter. And I know that you almost succeeded. I turned to look at Teddy. He hadn't moved since I walked in. His face was a battlefield of emotions, guilt and shame and fear and something else. Something that might have been relief. I spoke to him directly, ignoring everyone else. Theodore Raymond Mercer, I said, using his full name for the first time in decades. I spent 35 years raising you alone. I worked double shifts and gave up vacations and wore the same coat for 15 years so you could have everything you needed. I was there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, every triumph and failure and everything in between. I never asked you for anything except your love. My voice cracked, but I kept going. And when you married Clarissa, I stepped back. I let her family take over. I let them host the holidays and make the decisions and treat me like a visitor in your life because I thought that's what good mothers do. I thought if I just kept quiet, if I just kept swallowing, eventually it would get better. But it didn't get better. It got worse. And now my grandson, your son, was sitting outside in the cold because these people, I gestured at the Wentworths, decided he wasn't good enough to eat at their table. Teddy's mouth opened, but no words came out. I could see his hands shaking on the tablecloth. Mom, he finally managed. I didn't know. About Oliver. I swear I didn't know. Then you should have known, I said. You should have been paying attention. You should have noticed that your son was missing, that he was outside, that something was wrong. That's what fathers do. That's what family does. We pay attention to each other. We protect each other. We don't let strangers, I looked at Judith and Franklin, no matter how rich or powerful they are, decide who belongs and who doesn't. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Judith was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Franklin was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Clarissa had set down the carving knife and wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller, younger, less certain. And Oliver. Oliver was standing beside me with his shoulders back and his chin up, looking at me like I was the most important person in the world, like I was his hero, like I was family. Judith was the first to speak. Her voice was cold, controlled, the voice of a woman who had spent her whole life winning arguments. This is outrageous, she said. You barge into my home, make wild accusations, disrupt our holiday. I think you should leave before we call the police. I almost laughed. Call them, I said. Call them and explain why an 8-year-old boy was outside in near-freezing temperatures while you ate turkey and drank champagne. Call them and tell them about the things you said about me, the lies you told my grandson, the campaign you've waged against his own grandmother. I'm sure they'll be very interested. Judith's face went red. Franklin put a hand on her arm, a warning gesture. The other guests were looking anywhere but at us, embarrassed, uncomfortable, trapped in someone else's family drama. Clarissa stepped forward again, her voice softer now, more careful. Sophia, she said, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Obviously, there's been some miscommunication. Why don't we sit down and... No, I said. I'm not sitting down. I'm not having a polite conversation. I'm not pretending anymore that everything is fine when it isn't. I looked at her, really looked at her for what felt like the first time. "I used to think you were just insecure," I said. "I used to think you pushed me away because you were afraid of losing Teddy to me, like mothers and wives sometimes are. I made excuses for you. I told myself you'd grow out of it, that someday we'd be friends, that family is complicated but love wins in the end. I was wrong." Clarissa's eyes glistened. Whether it was guilt or anger or just wounded pride, I couldn't tell. And I realized I didn't care. I was done trying to read her, done trying to understand her, done trying to earn a place in a family that had never wanted me. Do you believe that time heals all wounds? Or does time just teach us which wounds we can survive and which ones will scar us forever? I've spent 11 years trying to heal from the wound of being unwanted. I've spent 11 years hoping that someday things would be different. But some wounds don't heal. Some wounds just teach you where not to put your trust. I knelt down to Oliver's level again. "Do you want to stay here?" I asked him. "Do you want to sit at this table and eat this food with these people? Or do you want to come with me?" He looked at the dining room, at the relatives who wouldn't meet his eyes, at the grandmother who had sent him outside, at the parents who had let it happen. Then he looked back at me. "Can we have pancakes?" he asked. "With chocolate chips?" I smiled. "We can have whatever you want." I stood up and took his hand. I started walking toward the door, not looking back, not waiting for permission, not caring what anyone thought. "Mom, wait!" Teddy's voice stopped me. He had stood up from the table. His face was a mess of conflicting emotions. But there was something else there now, something I hadn't seen in years: determination. He walked toward us, slowly at first, then faster. When he reached Oliver, he knelt down and hugged him, a real hug, the kind that says, "I'm sorry," without words. "I didn't know," he said again. "I should have known. I should have been paying attention." Then he looked up at me. "I've been a coward," he said, "a coward and a fool." He glanced back at the Wentworths, at Clarissa, at the life he had built by letting other people make his choices. "I think," he said slowly, "I think I need to make some changes." Clarissa made a sound of protest. "Teddy," she said, "you can't just—" "I can," he said, "and I am." He stood up, keeping one hand on Oliver's shoulder. "Mom, can we come with you?" The question hung in the air. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, this man I had almost lost. I thought about all the years of silence, all the swallowed pain, all the times I had chosen peace over truth. And I thought about what Raymond would say if he were here. "Always," I said, "you can always come home." We walked out of the Wentworth house together, the three of us, leaving behind the cold stares and the expensive food and the family that had never really been ours. The morning had warmed slightly, or maybe I had just stopped feeling the cold. Oliver was chattering about pancakes and chocolate chips and whether I still had the old telescope he had gotten for his birthday. Teddy was quiet, but he stayed close, like he was afraid of being left behind. We drove to a diner on the edge of town, one of those old places with red vinyl booths and menus that haven't changed since the 70s. We ordered pancakes with chocolate chips for Oliver, eggs and bacon for Teddy, and the biggest cup of coffee they had for me. We talked about small things at first, about school and work and whether the rain would hold off. But then Oliver asked the question that mattered. "Grandma," he said, his mouth full of pancake, "why did they not like you?" I thought about how to answer. I thought about the easy lies I could tell, the comfortable half-truths that would smooth things over. But I was done with lies. I was done with smoothing things over. Some people, I said, are afraid of things they don't understand. I'm not rich like them. I'm not fancy. I say the wrong words sometimes, and I wear the wrong clothes, and I don't know which fork to use at dinner parties. And because of that, they decided I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong. Oliver frowned. "That's stupid," he said. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." He thought about this for a moment. "I don't care about forks," he said finally. "I just want someone who makes good pancakes and tells me I'm family." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're family," I said. "You will always be family, and I will always, always tell you so." The weeks that followed were not easy. There were lawyers and conversations, and long nights when Teddy sat at my kitchen table with his head in his hands, trying to figure out what came next. Clarissa called constantly at first, then not at all. The Wentworths sent letters that sounded like threats dressed in legal language. There were moments when I wondered if I had done the right thing, if I had made everything worse, if I should have just stayed quiet like I always had. But then I would look at Oliver, playing in my backyard, laughing at the birds, asking me questions about the stars. I would look at Teddy, slowly coming back to life, slowly remembering who he was before the Wentworths convinced him he needed to be someone else. And I knew. I knew that truth is never the wrong choice, even when it's hard. I knew that silence is not peace, it's just pain with a longer deadline. I knew that love worth having is love you're willing to fight for. Christmas came, and for the first time in 11 years, it was spent in my little bungalow in southeast Portland. We had a tree that Oliver decorated himself, with ornaments that were crooked and tinsel that was everywhere, and a star on top that Raymond had made with his own hands 30 years ago. We had turkey that I cooked in my old oven, stuffing from a box because I never could get the homemade kind right, and pecan pie that Oliver said was the best he had ever tasted. We had carols on the radio and presents wrapped in newspaper because I had forgotten to buy wrapping paper. We had everything that mattered and nothing that didn't. On Christmas night, after Oliver was asleep and Teddy had gone to bed, I sat alone in my living room, looking at the tree lights twinkling in the darkness. I thought about Raymond, about how proud he would be, about how much he would have loved seeing his grandson come home. I thought about all the years I had wasted trying to fit into a family that didn't want me, all the compromises I had made, all the dignity I had surrendered in the name of keeping the peace. I didn't need them to punish the Wentworths. I didn't need revenge or victory or any kind of justice that involved lawyers and courtrooms. The truth had done its work all by itself. The truth had shown my son who his wife's family really was. The truth had brought my grandson back to me. The truth had set me free from 40 years of swallowing. Spring came early that year. I was in my backyard, planting tomatoes like I did every year, when Oliver came running out with a piece of paper in his hand. "Grandma, look," he shouted. "I got an A on my science project, the one about stars." He threw his arms around me and I hugged him back, smelling dirt and little boy and hope. That night we set up the telescope in the backyard, the one I had given him 2 years ago, the one that had spent so long forgotten in the Wentworth garage. We looked at the moon together, at the craters and the shadows and all the mysteries waiting to be discovered. Grandpa Raymond used to look at the stars, I told him. He believed there were answers up there, answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet. Oliver was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think the answers are down here too, in people, in families, in grandmas who make pancakes." I smiled, my eyes suddenly wet. "I think you're right." The custody arrangement took months to finalize. Teddy got joint custody, which meant Oliver spent half his time with us and half with Clarissa. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was fair, and it was real, and it was built on truth instead of lies. Clarissa and I never became friends. We probably never will. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. She stopped fighting so hard. She stopped trying to erase me. Maybe she realized that her war against me had cost her more than she had gained. Maybe she just got tired. Or maybe, just maybe, she saw the way Oliver looked at me. and she understood that some bonds can't be broken, no matter how hard you try. Judith and Franklin never apologized. People like them rarely do. But they faded into the background, becoming just another set of grandparents instead of the only ones who mattered. Oliver still sees them sometimes, but he sees me more. He knows now that family isn't about money or status or which fork you use. Family is about showing up. Family is about fighting for each other. Family is about love that doesn't ask for anything in return. On the 1-year anniversary of that Thanksgiving, I made pecan pie again. This time there was no driving across town, no hoping for a seat at someone else's table. This time the table was mine. Oliver helped me roll out the crust. Teddy whipped the cream. We ate too much and laughed too loud and told stories about Raymond until the candles burned down to nothing. After dinner, Oliver handed me a card he had made at school. On the front, he had drawn a picture of the two of us looking through the telescope. Inside, he had written, in his careful 8-year-old handwriting, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't cry. I had done enough crying to last a lifetime. Instead, I just held that card to my chest and said the only thing that mattered. I never would have. Not ever. Not for anything in the world. This story is fictional, but it came from somewhere real. It came from every mother who has been pushed aside, every grandmother who has been erased, every woman who has swallowed her pain to keep the peace. If this story touched your heart, I want you to know that you're not alone. There are others out there who understand, who have been through similar battles, who have found their way back to the people who matter. I often ask myself what I would do differently if I could go back. Would I have spoken up sooner? Would I have fought harder? Would I have refused to swallow the first time someone tried to make me small? Maybe, maybe not. The truth is, we all find our courage in our own time. The important thing is that we find it at all. So if you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own battle, I want you to know it's not too late. It's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to fight for the people you love. It's never too late to stop swallowing and start speaking. They tried to take everything from me. They almost succeeded. But in the end, I was the one who kept the truth, and the truth kept me. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the best medicine for pain is knowing that someone else has survived the same wound. In the meantime, at the end of this video, I've linked 2 more stories from this channel. They're stories about women like me, women who found their voice after years of silence, women who discovered that love is worth fighting for. I think you'll find something in them that speaks to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, no matter what anyone tells you, you are family. You belong. You matter. God bless, and may courage find you when you need it most. But before I close this chapter of my life, let me tell you about one more moment. One more memory that I carry with me like a photograph in my wallet, worn at the edges but precious beyond measure. It happened about 6 months after that Thanksgiving. Spring had truly arrived in Portland, the kind of spring that makes you forget all the rain that came before it. The cherry blossoms were blooming along the waterfront, and the whole city seemed to wake up from a long winter sleep. Teddy had officially filed for divorce by then. It was not an easy decision, and I want to be clear, I never asked him to do it. I never wanted my son's marriage to end. What I wanted was for him to see the truth, to make his own choices based on reality rather than fear. The choice to leave Clarissa was his alone. I just gave him the space to make it. On this particular Saturday, Teddy called me in the morning and asked if I wanted to go for a drive. Oliver was with his mother for the weekend, and Teddy had been restless all week, unable to settle, unable to find peace in his new apartment with its bare walls and rented furniture. "Sure," I said. "Where do you want to go?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I want to show you something. Something I should have shown you a long time ago. We drove for about an hour, out of the city, past the suburbs, into the countryside where the roads narrow and the houses spread apart. I didn't ask where we were going. I just watched the landscape change through the window, the strip malls giving way to farms, the pavement giving way to gravel. Finally, Teddy pulled off onto a dirt road that wound up a hillside. At the top, there was a small clearing with a wooden bench facing west, overlooking the valley below. He parked the car and we got out, the cool spring air fresh and clean, the silence broken only by birdsong. Dad and I found this place when I was about 12, Teddy said, his voice quiet. We were on one of our weekend adventures, just driving around looking for new places to explore. He was like that, remember? Always curious, always looking for something. I remembered. Raymond had an explorer's heart, even though he spent most of his life behind a desk. Every weekend, he would pack the car with sandwiches and thermoses of coffee and take Teddy somewhere new. Sometimes a hiking trail, sometimes a small town, sometimes just a stretch of road neither of them had traveled before. I stayed home most of those days, catching up on sleep, enjoying the quiet. I never minded. I knew they needed that time together, father and son, learning how to be men in each other's company. He made me promise never to tell anyone about this place, Teddy continued. He said it was our secret spot, our place to come when the world got too loud. He looked at me, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. After he died, I came here a lot, just to sit, just to feel close to him again. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, feeling the wind on my face, looking out at the valley where the sunlight painted patterns on the fields below. Raymond had been gone for over 20 years, but in that moment he felt very close. Like he was just out of sight, just around the corner, still exploring, still curious. I never brought anyone else here, Teddy said. Not Clarissa, not Oliver, no one. Because it felt like betraying him somehow, like sharing his secret without permission. He paused, struggling with words. But I want you to know about it now, he said, because I think Dad would have wanted that. I think he would have wanted you to have a piece of him too. A piece that was just ours. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight, my heart too full. All those years I had thought the bond between Raymond and Teddy was something separate from me, something I watched from the outside, something beautiful, but not mine. I had been wrong. The bond was mine too. It was just waiting for the right moment to include me. We sat on that wooden bench for almost 2 hours. We talked about Raymond, about the little things I had almost forgotten, his terrible jokes, his habit of humming while he worked, the way he always burnt the toast but refused to let anyone else make breakfast. We talked about Teddy's childhood, about the moments I had missed while working, about the fears and dreams and questions that had shaped him into the man he had become. We talked about Oliver, about what kind of grandfather Raymond would have been, about how we could honor his memory by being the family he would have wanted. By the time we drove home, something had shifted between us. The distance that the Wentworths had built, brick by brick over 11 years, had finally started to crumble. We were not just mother and son anymore. We were survivors of the same storm, learning how to rebuild together. The divorce was finalized in early summer. Clarissa got the house in the West Hills, which was fine with Teddy because he never felt at home there anyway. She got most of the furniture, most of the artwork, most of the things that had never really belonged to him in the first place. What Teddy got was his freedom, and joint custody of Oliver, and a chance to start over. He moved into a small apartment near my neighborhood, close enough that Oliver could walk between our houses, close enough that I could bring over dinner on the nights when Teddy worked late, close enough that we could be a family again in all the ways that mattered. Oliver adjusted better than any of us expected. Children are resilient that way, bending instead of breaking, finding joy in the smallest things. He loved having two homes. He loved the freedom of not having to be perfect all the time, not having to perform for the Wentworths, not having to earn love that should have been given freely. He started calling me Grandma instead of Nana Viv, a small change that felt enormous. He started asking about his grandfather Raymond, about his great-grandparents, about all the family history that the Wentworths had tried to erase. I told him everything I knew. I showed him photographs, read him letters, played him the recordings Raymond had made of Teddy as a baby. I gave him the roots he had been denied, the sense of belonging that comes from knowing where you come from and who loved you before you were even born. There was one conversation I remember especially well. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon, about 8 months after that Thanksgiving, and Oliver was at my house helping me organize the attic. We found a box of Raymond's old things, books and awards and random souvenirs from his weekend adventures. At the bottom of the box was a letter, yellowed with age, written in Raymond's careful handwriting. "What's this?" Oliver asked, holding it up. I took it from him, recognizing the paper immediately. It was a letter Raymond had written to Teddy on his 5th birthday, to be given to him when he turned 18. Raymond had died before that could happen, and the letter had gotten lost in the shuffle of grief and moving and all the chaos that follows loss. I opened it carefully, afraid it might fall apart in my hands. Then I read it out loud. "Dear Theodore," it began. "By the time you read this, you will be a man. I hope I have lived long enough to see it, but if I haven't, I want you to know something. Something I try to tell you every day but don't always say right. You are the best thing I ever did. Better than any job, any accomplishment, any achievement. You are my legacy, my proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I left something good behind. I don't know what kind of man you will become. I don't know what challenges you will face, what victories you will win, what losses you will suffer. But I know this. You have your mother's strength and my curiosity, and that combination will carry you through anything. Be brave, son. Be kind. Be honest. Stand up for the people you love, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's what family does. That's what family is. I love you more than stars love the sky, more than rivers love the sea, more than any words on any page could ever express. Your father, always, Raymond." Oliver was quiet for a long time after I finished reading. Then he said, in a voice much older than 8 years old, "I think Grandpa Raymond was really smart." "He was," I agreed. "He was the smartest man I ever knew." Oliver looked at me with those big brown eyes, the same eyes as his father, the same eyes as his grandfather. "Do you think he knows?" he asked. "Do you think he knows I finally found out about him?" I thought about that question carefully. I thought about Raymond's faith, which was quiet and personal, and about my own beliefs, which are complicated and ever-changing. I thought about all the ways we try to make sense of loss, all the stories we tell ourselves about where people go when they leave us. "I think," I said slowly, "that love doesn't disappear when people die. I think it stays in the people they loved, and in the people those people love, and on forever. So yes, I think Grandpa Raymond knows. I think he's known all along." Oliver nodded, satisfied with this answer. Then he reached into the box and pulled out an old compass, tarnished with age but still beautiful. "Can I keep this?" he asked. "To help me find my way?" My eyes filled with tears. "Of course," I said. "That's exactly what it's for." The months continued to pass. Summer turned to fall, fall turned to winter, winter turned to another spring. Life found its rhythm, slower and steadier than before, like a river that had finally settled into its course after years of flooding. Teddy started dating again, cautiously at first, then with more confidence. He met a woman named Patricia who worked at the library, a quiet woman with kind eyes and a gentle laugh, who had no interest in West Hill society, and no patience for people who judged others by their bank accounts. I liked her immediately. More importantly, Oliver liked her. He said she read books the right way, which was high praise from an 8-year-old who had strong opinions about such things. I turned 68, then 69. My knees got worse. My eyesight got worse. My memory started to play tricks on me, hiding names and dates in corners I couldn't always find. But my heart got stronger. It had to. It was holding so much more than it used to. On the second anniversary of that Thanksgiving, we had a celebration. Not a big one, just the four of us. Me, Teddy, Oliver, and Patricia. We sat in my living room with pizza and root beer floats, playing board games and telling stories and laughing at nothing in particular. At one point, Oliver looked up from the game board and said, "This is my favorite holiday now. Better than Christmas. Better than my birthday." "Why is that?" Patricia asked. "Because it's the day Grandma came back," Oliver said simply. "The day she fought for me." "I didn't fight," I said. "I just told the truth." Oliver shook his head, wise beyond his years. "That is fighting," he said. "Sometimes the truth is the hardest fight there is." I thought about that for a long time afterward. I thought about all the times I had stayed silent, all the times I had swallowed, all the times I had chosen comfort over courage. I thought about the price I had paid for that silence, the years I had lost, the moments I had missed. And I thought about the gift I had received when I finally spoke up, the gift of my family, returned to me against all odds. Truth is a fight, the hardest fight there is, because truth demands that we see ourselves clearly, the good and the bad, the strong and the weak. Truth demands that we confront the lies we have told ourselves and the lies others have told us. Truth demands that we choose authenticity over approval, integrity over comfort, love over fear. I am not saying I did everything right. I made mistakes along the way. I said things I shouldn't have said, hurt people I didn't mean to hurt, burned bridges that maybe could have been repaired. But I told the truth. And in the end, that was enough. Clarissa and I have reached something like peace now. Not friendship, probably never friendship, but a ceasefire. An acknowledgement that we both love Oliver and will do what's best for him, even if we disagree about everything else. She has remarried, a businessman from Seattle, and seems happier than she ever was with Teddy. I hope that's true. I hope she has found whatever she was looking for all those years ago when she tried to erase me from existence. The Wentworths have faded into the background, as I said before. Judith still gives me cold looks at school events, still refuses to speak to me directly, still acts as if I am beneath her notice. But her power over my family is broken. Her influence over my grandson is gone. She is just an old woman now, clinging to her pride and her pearls, while the world moves on without her. I think about that often. I think about how much energy she spent trying to diminish me, trying to make me feel small, trying to convince everyone that I didn't matter. And I think about how little it accomplished in the end. All those years of scheming and manipulating and playing her careful games, and what did she win? An empty victory. A grandson who sees through her, a reputation that whispers follow down every hallway. I did not need revenge. I did not need her to apologize or admit she was wrong. I just needed to outlast her. And I did. The truth always outlasts the lies, if you're patient enough to wait. Raymond used to say that character is what you do when no one is watching. I used to think that meant being good in private, being honest when it's easy, being kind when there's no reward. But I understand now that it means something else too. Character is what remains when everything else is stripped away. When the money is gone, when the power is gone, when the beauty and the youth and the health are all faded memories. Character is the only thing that matters in the end. I am 69 years old. I have lived a long life. Not an easy one, but a full one. I have loved and lost and loved again. I have made mistakes and been forgiven. I have been hurt and healed. I have swallowed more pain than I can measure and spoken more truth than I ever thought possible. And I have my family. Not the family I expected, not the family I planned, but the family I earned. The family I fought for. The family that chose me back. On clear nights, Oliver and I still take out the telescope. We look at the same stars Raymond looked at all those years ago. The same stars that have watched over humanity since before words existed to name them. We talk about space and time and the mysteries that no one has solved yet. We talk about school and friends and what Oliver wants to be when he grows up. We talk about everything and nothing, the way families do, the way families should. Last week, he told me he wants to be an astronaut. He wants to go to the moon, he said, and look back at Earth and see everything at once. He wants to understand the big picture, the whole story, the way it all fits together. You know what I think? He said, his eye pressed to the viewfinder. I think everyone down here is looking at things too close, getting caught up in little stuff that doesn't matter. But up there, he pointed at the sky. Up there you can see what's really important. You can see who really loves you and who's just pretending. I smiled at him, this boy who had become my whole world. You're pretty smart, I said, for an 8-year-old. He grinned. I know. I get it from my grandma. Those words meant more than any award, any promotion, any recognition I received in 35 years of nursing. Those words were my legacy, my proof that I existed, that I mattered, that I left something good behind. So if you have stayed with me through this whole story, I want to thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for seeing me. And if my story has stirred something in you, if it has reminded you of battles you have fought or battles you still need to fight, I want to leave you with one final thought. It is never too late. Never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to stand up for yourself. Never too late to fight for the people you love. The world will tell you otherwise. The world will tell you to stay quiet, to keep the peace, to swallow your pain and smile through the injuries. But the world is wrong. You matter. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And anyone who tries to convince you otherwise is not worth your silence. They tried to erase me. They almost succeeded. But here I am, still standing, still fighting, still loving my family with everything I have. They took 11 years from me, but they couldn't take my heart. They couldn't take my truth. They couldn't take the bond between a grandmother and her grandson, forged in cold and reborn in fire. In the end, that bond was stronger than anything they could throw at it. In the end, love won. Not the easy kind of love, not the comfortable kind, the hard kind, the fighting kind, the kind that survives winter and blooms again in spring. That is the only kind worth having. If this story has touched you, please like and share it. Leave a comment telling me your own story, your own battles, your own victories. Let's build a community of warriors, of truth tellers, of grandmothers and mothers and daughters who refuse to be erased. Because we are not alone. We have never been alone. We have each other. And together, we are stronger than any family that tries to diminish us, any system that tries to silence us, any world that tries to make us small. May your truth be your weapon and your love be your shield. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, family is not about blood. Family is about choice. Choose the people who choose you back. That is the secret. That is the gift. That is everything.